Dubbed the King of Pop and known as much for his controversies as he is for his tremendous talent as a performer, Michael Jackson is one of the most influential artists of the 20th century. Though his career was marred by horrific allegations and much scrutiny regarding his looks and dating history, his name is still legendary, and his music and creativity are both well respected to this day. Michael Joseph Jackson was born on August 29, 1958 in Gary, Indiana, and was the 8th of 10 children born to Joseph Joe Jackson and his wife, Catherine. The Jacksons were a working-class family sharing a 2-bedroom house, with their father working as a crane operator at US Steel. Both Michael's mother and father were musically gifted. Catherine played clarinet and piano and wished to be a country and western performer, while Joe played guitar for a local rhythm and blues band named the Falcons. By all accounts, the children's upbringing was tumultuous. In 1964, Michael and his brother Marlon joined the Jackson Brothers, a band formed by their father which included 3 other siblings, Jackie, Tito, and Jermaine. Reportedly, during rehearsals, their father would watch them with a belt in hand. Mistakes were cruelly punished by physical attacks, and Michael recalled that he also suffered emotional abuse at the hands of his father, who frequently commented on his fat nose. He also recalled feeling lonely and isolated. Though he was whipped regularly by Joe, Catherine argued that in the 60s, corporal punishment was a normal way to discipline children. In 1965, the band's name was changed to the Jackson 5, and later that same year, the group entered and won a talent show, which led them to tour the Midwest. They performed at clubs, cocktail lounges, auditoriums, and high school dances, eventually catching the eye of a talented agent. Their first single, Big Boy, was released in 1968. The group subsequently signed a record deal and relocated to LA. Just a year later, their single, I Want You Back, shot to number 1 on the US Billboard Hot 100, where it remained for a month. 3 further singles continued to top the charts, including ABC, The Love You Save, and I'll Be There. Michael led the way on the tracks, his vocal and overall musical talent stunning audiences and critics given his young age. Clifton Davis, who wrote the band's number 2 single, Never Can Say Goodbye, recalled, Michael was young, but he was professional. His ear and pitch were amazing. He could take things and make them his own. It wasn't long before Michael began to pursue a solo career. Between 1972 and 1975, following the blazing success of the Jackson 5 and his family's move to a 2-acre estate in Encino, California, he released 4 albums and became the newest, hottest teen idol. Michael continued working with the Jackson 5, although by this time, every member was frustrated by the lack of creative control they had over their career. In 1975, the band renamed themselves the Jacksons and left their record label, signing with Epic Records instead. Following the rebrand, the siblings' younger brother, Randy, joined the group, while Jermaine opted to leave and follow a solo career. The band continued with Michael at the helm, releasing 6 albums between 1976 and 1984. Michael also became the band's main songwriter. In 1977, he ventured to New York City to star in a musical film named The Wiz, alongside Diana Ross. But the movie was a flop, although it did connect him with Quincy Jones, who composed the film's score. Jones later helped Michael produce his solo music. In 1978, Michael underwent rhinoplasty, and a year later, he launched his 5th album, Off the Wall, which helped cement his career and ability as a solo artist, producing hits like Don't Stop Till You Get Enough and Rock With You. The album reached number 3 on the US Billboard 200, sold 20 million copies worldwide, and granted him several wins at the American Music Awards. In 1982, Michael released Thriller, which is now considered the best-selling album of all time worldwide, selling around 70 million copies and catapulting him into megastardom. It stayed at the top of the Billboard 200 charts for 37 weeks and was in the top 10 for a further 80 weeks. It was also the first album to produce 7 Billboard Hot 100 top 10 singles. The following year, Michael received his first Emmy Award nomination, debuted his now famous Moonwalk dance, and took home 8 Grammy Awards. In 1984, Michael met with some minor incidents and controversies. During the filming of a commercial for Pepsi with his brothers, Michael's hair was set on fire, causing second-degree burns to his scalp. He underwent treatment for his injuries and also had his third rhinoplasty around this time. Later that year, he and his brothers embarked on their victory tour, which not only was a financial failure, but drew criticism for the high ticket prices. Furthermore, the tour caused severe tension between the brothers. Michael eventually cut the tour short by declining to go on a European and Australian leg, and he announced his official split from the band during their LA performance. Over the coming years, Michael's appearance sparked much discussion. He was diagnosed with lupus in the 1980s, as well as vitiligo, a condition characterized by patches of skin losing pigment. As a result, Michael often wore pale makeup, and many speculated that he was even using skin bleaching creams, though he denied the allegations that he was bleaching his skin. It has also been suggested that Michael suffered from an eating disorder during this time, though he later argued that he had lost weight after changing his diet, something he'd done in order to achieve a dancer's body. Still, his career continued to see success. In 1987, he released Bad, his first album in 5 years. It became critically acclaimed and produced 5 US #1 singles, including Dirty Diana and Man in the Mirror. He won several more awards during this time and followed up the album launch with a sold-out tour. A year later, he released his autobiography Moonwalk, which sold 20,000 copies and purchased 2,700 acres of land near Santa Ynez, California, which became his home, Neverland Ranch. The property cost him $19.5 million and had come to his attention after it was used as the backdrop of a music video he filmed with Paul McCartney. In 1991, Michael renewed his contract with Sony for the modern equivalent of $145 million, and that same year he released his 8th album, Dangerous, which was another great success. He also established the Heal the World Foundation, which raised millions of dollars to help children suffering from poverty, war, and disease, and he advocated for more funding to be put into HIV/AIDS research. In 1993, he gave a 90-minute interview with Oprah Winfrey, in which he denied the many rumors about himself and spoke about how his father had abused him during childhood. Later that same year, an enormous scandal emerged when a man named Evan Chandler accused Michael of sexually abusing his 13-year-old son, Jordan. Police eventually raided his home and discovered 2 art books containing photographs of boys running and playing in various states of undress, although Michael denied all knowledge of its contents. In January 1994, he settled with the Chandlers out of court. He reportedly paid them $23 million and criminal charges were not pursued due to lack of evidence. Though Michael was never prosecuted, his publicist would later state, "That kind of represents the beginning of the walk down a tragic path, financially, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, legally." Citing health issues and the stress of recent allegations, Michael cancelled the rest of his tour. During the remainder of the 1990s, he married and divorced Lisa Marie Presley, daughter of Elvis and Priscilla, and released several albums and singles, including Scream with his sister Janet Jackson, They Don't Care About Us, and Earth Song. He also embarked on another worldwide tour and married again, this time to Debbie Rowe, who gave birth to his first child in 1997 and his second in 1998. He and Debbie divorced in 2000. Michael's career continued into the 2000s. He released another album after a 6-year hiatus, reunited with his brothers to perform, and organised and hosted numerous benefit concerts. In 2002, an anonymous surrogate mother gave birth to his 3rd child. On November 20th that year, Michael drew great criticism and he was photographed holding the baby over the railing of his hotel room, an incident he described as a terrible mistake. During this time, he also had disputes with his record label and was sued by a promoter for failing to perform 2 concerts in 1999. In 2003, a documentary named Living with Michael Jackson was released and featured footage of the 45-year-old holding hands with a 12-year-old boy as they discussed sleeping arrangements. He stated that he did not see the harm in sharing his bed and bedroom with various people, including minors, and that it was not a sexual thing, though his actions and words drew further criticism, speculation, and accusations, especially when later that year he was charged with 7 counts of child molestation and 2 counts of intoxicating a minor with alcohol. He was acquitted of all counts in 2005, An FBI report released 4 years later showed that no evidence of criminal conduct had been found. During his last 4 years, Michael became a recluse. He spent time living in Bahrain, closed his ranch at Neverland, and it was discovered that he was on the verge of bankruptcy and was involved in 47 lawsuits. He also owed over $300,000 in back pay to his employees and was eventually ordered to pay $100,000 in penalties. In mid-2006, he moved to Grouse Lodge, a residential recording studio in Ireland. His last public performance was on November 15th of that year, and he briefly joined in on a performance of We Are the World at the Music Awards in London. He later returned to the US, settling in Las Vegas, and started working on another album. For his 50th birthday in 2008, a greatest hits album was released by Sony, and the following year, he announced a series of comeback concerts titled This Is It. He planned to carry out the shows and possibly retire afterwards. However, record-breaking ticket sales led to further dates being added. He was still rehearsing for his show at the time of his death. Despite once being one of the most well-paid performers on the planet, Michael's crippling debts, said to be an estimated $500 million, meant that he needed a plan to get his finances back under control, and part of that plan involved his This Is It tour. Other ventures in the works included a new album, films, a museum, and a casino, though none of it came to fruition due to his sudden death. For the tour, he'd written numerous new songs and was rehearsing for hours every day, but it soon became apparent that Michael was not in the right headspace for performing. His makeup artist and hairstylist, Karen Fay, described the megastar as paranoid, shivering from chills and frequently repeating himself. He often looked unwell, with Karen adding that he was upbeat, but he was on the thin side. He reportedly weighed just 130 pounds at the time of his passing, despite his tall 6-foot frame. She said that in the 2 months between April 2009 and June 2009, he'd changed drastically, observing, "He was not the man I knew. He was acting like a person I didn't recognize." She recalled that during one performance, he appeared stoic and then frightened, repeatedly asking, "Why can't I choose?" New to Michael's close and personal team, who were to help him prepare for the tour, was Dr. Conrad Murray, whom the singer had met in 2006 after the doctor had treated one of his children. Murray was charged with keeping Michael in good health, but it was apparent that the singer had a myriad of health problems. For one, he was still suffering from the pain left over from the burns he'd endured following the Pepsi commercial incident in 1984, and he was also dealing with back problems after he was injured during a concert in Munich, Germany. Michael was also known to have issues sleeping after tour performances. All of this made him reliant on prescription drugs, with one former employee of his recalling that he would take 30 to 40 Xanax pills a night, Xanax being a fast-acting tranquilizer. Following Michael's death, Dr. Murray admitted that he'd regularly given the 50-year-old propofol to help him sleep. Propofol is described as a powerful general anesthetic and sedative. He'd also given him other sedatives, including diazepam, lorazepam, and midazolam, throughout his employment as Michael's personal physician. Show director Kenny Ortega noted that Michael missed a performance on June 13, 2009 on his doctor's advice, and then subsequently missed another week. When he finally returned to rehearsals on June 19th, he appeared lost, cold, afraid. He said that he believed the best thing to do would be to stop the production, but he added that he did not want to break Michael's heart. He later wrote to the concert promoters, AEG, that the performer was showing signs of paranoia, anxiety, and obsessive disorder-like behavior. He also observed that the star seemed almost disassociative, with Michael telling Kenny, "God keeps talking to me." Kenny added that he thought a psychiatrist should be brought in to evaluate Michael's state of mind, and told AEG, "It is like there is two people there. One trying to hold on to what he was and still can be and not wanting us to quit him. The other in this weakened and troubled state." However, the following day, Murray gave the singer the all clear. According to those around him, Michael returned to rehearsals once more on June the 23rd, a completely different person once again. This time he was in good spirits and had brilliant energy levels, with Murray later telling investigators that he had stopped administering propofol several days before this. Kenny recalled, "He was so brilliant on stage, I had goosebumps." On the evening of June 24th, Michael left his residence in Holmby Hills, LA, and headed to the Staples Center in LA for another grueling rehearsal. Unbeknownst to him, it would be his last. Before the performance began, however, he first had meetings with his manager and the president of AEG. Afterwards, he spent an hour going over the 3D effects for the show before having dinner, which consisted of chicken and broccoli. He then went to his room, returning a little later to carry out a 3-hour rehearsal. By all accounts, Michael continued to be enthusiastic and upbeat, and his performances were going well. At midnight, as rehearsals wound up, Michael hugged and thanked his crew and his backing performers before returning home. That night, though, Michael's energy seemed to dwindle as he complained about his exhaustion. Dr. Murray worried that he'd become addicted to propofol and administered Valium to help him sleep. Throughout the night, he gave further doses of sedatives, but never gave him any propofol, despite Michael allegedly asking for it on several occasions. On the morning of June 25th, however, Murray changed his mind and added some of the drug to the singer's IV drip. He later told police that he'd stayed for a further 10 minutes before going to the bathroom. When he returned 2 minutes later, he found Michael seemingly unconscious. Upon closer inspection, he'd noticed that the singer wasn't breathing. Murray attempted to resuscitate Michael and even administered flumazenil, a drug used to counteract the sedative overdose, but to no avail. Murray would later be criticised for administering CPR while Michael was on the bed, instead of a hard floor, which is standard practice. He was also condemned for trying to revive Michael using one hand while the other was placed beneath his body. This too is not a regular practice. Notably, still, the doctor failed to call emergency services, which he explained away by stating that there was no landline telephone and he didn't know the house's exact address. Despite this, he made several private calls on his mobile about an hour after discovering that Michael wasn't breathing. He did not offer this information to law enforcement. It wasn't until a security guard discovered the situation that 911 was called at 12:21 p.m, over an hour and a half after Michael had stopped breathing. Paramedics who arrived shortly afterwards were also unable to revive the 50-year-old, as were doctors at the UCLA Medical Center where he was transported. Michael was pronounced dead at 2:26 p.m. on June 5th, 2009. A 3-hour autopsy was carried out the following day, though no evidence of trauma or foul play was discovered. A witness who saw his body in the morgue observed, seeing him lying there, he looked peaceful. Just over a month after the post-mortem, on August 28th, the LA County coroner classified the death as a homicide, attributing his demise to acute propofol intoxication, which was worsened by the other drugs in his system. Reportedly, Michael was in good health at the time of his passing. His heart was strong, and though his lungs were inflamed, this did not contribute to his death. The LAPD and Drug Enforcement Administration subsequently investigated the singer's death. During their investigation, they spoke with a Tokyo-based physician who told them of his concerns when he treated Michael and his children on several occasions. He claimed that the pop star had been using various drugs at the time and requested a prescription for stimulants so that he could cope with his demanding rehearsals and performances. The doctor refused to prescribe him anything. However, noting that Michael seemed exhausted, was running a fever, and was suffering insomnia, among other things. He also stated his belief that part of the reason he was suffering from such debilitating symptoms was excessive use of steroids as part of his skin whitening medications. A search of Michael's residence as part of the case turned up several bottles of propofol. The drug is usually used in hospitals to induce and maintain anesthesia during surgery, but has been associated with cardiac arrest. A nurse who'd worked as his nutritionist told investigators that she too had been asked by Michael to provide propofol, but she turned him down. During the course of the investigation, the DEA put at least 9 doctors under investigation, while the police sought to question around 30 health workers who'd come into contact with the star. Eventually, though, authorities began looking at Dr. Murray Conrad. On February 8, 2010, Murray was charged with involuntary manslaughter. He pleaded not guilty and was released after posting a £75,000 bail. In January 2011, his medical license was suspended and he was ordered to stand trial for manslaughter. In November of that same year, he was found guilty of manslaughter and received 4 years in prison, the maximum prison sentence possible. However, due to prison overcrowding and good behaviour, he was released in 2013, having served just 2 years of his sentence. Michael's father, Joe, soon filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Murray, alleging that he lied to cover up his use of propofol, that he failed to keep sufficient medical records, and that he was negligent in his dispensing of medications. However, he dropped the suit in 2012. Meanwhile, Michael's mother and 3 of his siblings sued the concert promoter AEG, alleging that they'd negligently hired the doctor. However, a jury found that there was no evidence to support that AEG had been negligent, as there was nothing to say that Murray was unfit or incompetent. Michael's funeral and burial were held at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California on September 3, 2009. As well as his family and ex-wife, Lisa Marie Presley, present at the service were friends Macaulay Culkin, Chris Tucker, Quincy Jones, Eddie Murphy, and Elizabeth Taylor. Michael was interred in the Holy Terrace section in the Great Mausoleum at the cemetery, which is not accessible to the public.